assisted living, honoring resident choice, dignity, and independence. Our health and wellness focus keeps residents active. Golden Pond, state-of-the-art senior housing and healthcare services.
You're watching HCAM TV, and for more Hopkinton, visit HCAM Ed.
Hello Hopkinton. Welcome to eHop's 10th Annual Know Your Vote Forum. My name is Charusmita Ram and I'm the president of eHop. eHop's mission is to educate, engage and empower Hopkinton. We are glad you're tuned in today and we so look forward to hearing from you throughout the program. Our goal tonight is to provide an overview of what we'll be voting on for town meeting this year. We want to give the community a chance to ask questions and find out what to expect when we gather next Monday on May 2nd. We have a panel of town leaders here who've been working diligently throughout the year. They've spent a lot of time discussing, planning, negotiating, and ultimately creating the town budget and articles for Hopkinton voters to consider. I want to welcome viewers watching from home today on their TVs and also on YouTube live stream, both of which are made possible by HCAM TV. So thank you, HCAM. This forum is a community effort. Without all of you and without our town leaders being here, this session cannot be made possible. I'd like to thank you, our panelists and our special guests who have come here and given their time today. Let me introduce our panel and our special guests now. Irfan Nasrullah, Chair of Select Board. Norman Kumalo, Town Manager. John Nees, Town Assessor. Nancy Kavanaugh, Chair of the School Committee. Carol Kavanaugh, Superintendent of Schools. Susan Rothermick, Director of Finance and Operations of Schools. John Westerling, Director of DPW. Dan Terry, Chair of the Parks and Recreations Commission. We also have our guests here that include Elaine Lazarus, Assistant Town Manager, Jay Gulfi, Director of Parks and Recreation, Ellen Rutter, Town Moderator, Mary Larson Marlowe, Vice Chair, Planning Board, Connor Deegan, Town Clerk, Finance, Tim O'Leary, Town Chief Financial Officer, John Moran, Chair of the Upper Charles Trail Committee, Ken Weiss-Mantel, Chair of the Community Preservation Committee, Peter Lagoy, Chair of Trail Coordination and Management Committee, Dave Daltorio, Town Engineer, Mike Manning, Appropriations Committee, and Anne Karnowski, Citizen Petitioner. Thank you all so much for carving out the time to spend yet another night to answer all our questions. And lastly, I want to thank all of the eHop board members for helping put this together. eHop has been collecting a lot of questions from the community for this past week or so, and we're going to be taking live questions throughout the show tonight. So if you have any questions, people who are watching at home tonight, please send them to, or email them to knowyourvote@ehop.com. You may also add your comments on the YouTube live stream or also on the Facebook Messenger. We're going to cover a lot of information tonight. And if any of you want to get deeper into the topics relating to the town meeting, you can get materials, anything related to the budget numbers. All of those are available on our website at ehop.org. We will also be adding a recording of tonight's forum on the website in the next few days once it's made available. Before we go to the Q&A section, let me cover some introductory material relating to the town meeting. We'll be voting on a town budget of just over $100 million for fiscal year 2023. Now, this represents a 2.09% tax impact on residents and businesses, which equals an increase of $251 in taxes next year for the average home that is worth $681,100. Now, the town school budget is just under $55 million, which represents a 2.88% increase from FY22. The schools are projecting 214 new students to enter the system this fall. Now, there are bigger ticket items that we will be voting on. These items are debt inclusions, which basically means that if they pass, they will temporarily increase our taxes to fund the specific project, and these will require a second vote at the polls during the elections on May 16th. Now, these bigger items are a replacement of the fire engine for fire engine 2 budgeted for $736,318, upgrades and repairs in the vicinity of fire station number 2 in Woodville, budgeted for $400,000, repair work on the Lake Maspinock Dam area for $400,000, the replacement of air handling units in the middle school and high school buildings for $475,000. Increased cost for the Marathon School Addition project for $695,900. And finally, the replacement of the Fruit Street turf field for $1,671,543. Now let's get to the Q&A part, which is the most important part of today's session. So I'd like to kick off the questions by first asking covering some basic Town 101 questions with Ellen Rutter, our town moderator. Could you give us a brief overview of what we can expect at town meeting? Just some logistics, where it's going to happen. Will there be breaks? How many? Can people join at any time? Things like that.
Can you hear with us? Well, thanks for giving us this opportunity. We just did a walkthrough this afternoon, and the town meeting this year will be held in the high school field house. So I know we've had other meetings there, but not so recently. So the reason they chose this spot is because we can do better social distancing, and we also have better air handling than in the middle school. So it's in the high school, in the field house. We are setting up 600 chairs. It would be awesome if we had that many people attend. The meeting will start on Monday night, May 2nd at 7 p.m. It'll run till about 11 p.m. We don't expect to get through the whole agenda or the whole warrant in one night, and I'm talking to Nancy here. I'm saying probably 2 nights, I'm hoping. So then we would reconvene on Tuesday night at 7 in the same place. Another question I know that has come up is around food and drink, and the only thing allowed in the field house because of the basketball floor is water. So people can bring water there. If people need to take a break and have a snack, you're welcome to step outside. You can go into the cafeteria if you've brought a snack or something like that. We will have probably one organized break, but people can really come and go. So if a person needs to take a break, take a phone call or something like that, they can step outside of the meeting. Did you have any other specific things?
What's the quorum needed required for this year?
Okay, good question. So our rules say that we need 1% of registered voters, and this is the first year we're increasing it actually to 128. So we need 128 participants who can vote to run the meeting.
And I have one last question for you, and this may be, something that many of us who are new to town meeting may have. So some of the articles require 2/3 majority, and some just require a simple majority. So why is that?
Well, also, we have one on the warrant that requires 4/5. So we have a whole bunch of different combinations, and they're mostly statutory. So we have this book, Town Meeting Time, and it guides us on the rules that we follow for different votes on different articles.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for John Westerling from DPW. So this relates to Article 23 for the PFAS filtration system, which is budgeted for 600,000. So what's the background behind this? Why is this issue coming up now, and why should people care?
Good evening, and thank you for the question. This is coming up now because just last year, the DEP required that all communities in Massachusetts test for PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, which are essentially, they're found in non-stick materials and non-stain materials. So you'll find it in fabric, you'll find it in non-stick cooking pans. What we found when we did our testing back in July is that we had a level of 20.9 parts per trillion, and the maximum contaminant level as set by DEP is 20 parts per trillion. We continued to test monthly, and what we found was that for that first quarter, July, August, and September, that we violated the DEP PFAS regulation. So we had 30 days to come up with an alternative water supply for folks that are in any of the sensitive categories, which would be folks that are either pregnant, nursing mothers, infants less than a year old, or people with a compromised immune system. So we came up with a bottled water credit off of water bills. And then we had 60 days to provide a plan to remove PFAS from the water supply. That could have been anything from shutting down well number 6, where we found the PFAS, or providing a filtration system. Well number 6 provides 1/3 of our water supply, so shutting off that well was not an option. So we worked with our engineers, and we developed a filtration system that will filter out the PFAS from the water.
And how effective is this filtration system?
The filtration system is designed to bring it from a level of, currently our average is 24.2 parts per trillion. It will bring it down to non-detect levels. And then we'll have to change out the media. It'll be a combination of both granulated activated carbon and ion exchange resin. So as those begin to fill up or gunk up with PFAS, we need to either backflow, flush those, or replace those. So we'll continue to provide water that meets and exceeds the regulation.
Okay. And how often would this need to be replaced?
It really depends. The filter media, the filters themselves won't have to be replaced, but it depends on how the existing iron and manganese that we're finding in the water, how that reacts to the filters. But we're expecting that it'll be an annual process to replace the media.
Okay. And how long will this take to have it in place, to install it?
We need to have this in place continually to remove the PFAS, or until we come up with another water supply. And that, I believe, is the next question that will be asked.
Yeah.
So PFAS is a contaminant in the water. DEP requires that we remove it. We're committed to providing safe, potable water to the community. So it's in our interest, it's a primary goal for us to remove that from the system.
And will it create any sort of like a noise disturbance for the residents?
No, well number 6 is the only one of our 8 wells that has PFAS in it. And well number 6, if you're familiar with the Fruit Street fields, which I know that we'll hear about later, well number 6 is on the access road out to those fields. So it's in the middle of nowhere with essentially no abutters. And it's just a filter system, so it won't be a noisy system whatsoever.
Okay.
Samantha, if I could interrupt for 1 second. Hi, I'm Tara Sanda, Assistant Moderator with eHop. I just want to let the audience members know that if you do want to add to the conversation, you can feel free to come up to this microphone, and we will address you in that time. Thank you.
Thanks, Tara. Now, Article 22 is sort of related to the same PFAS issue. It's the MWRA, Massachusetts Water Resource Authority connection design work. Now, the $1.3 million that's budgeted, is that just for the design study alone?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry. It's not a design study. Let me be clear. We have already gone through the process of evaluating whether or not this is feasible. So the study has been concluded, and the study has found that it is a feasible solution to provide ample water supply to the community over the next 20 plus years. So this is actually the design of the infrastructure to get the water from the MWRA pipeline into our water system.
Okay. And so the filtration system will be in place until we have this more permanent solution.
That's correct.
And how long is this estimated to be complete?
The process includes negotiating with the town of Southborough, negotiating with the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority. There are different environmental studies that we have to do, and then there's the procurement and the construction. So we are looking at the short side of 3 years and the long side of 5 years.
Okay. And to actually install this or to make this connection happen, does any kind of road digging and stuff like that, is that involved? And do you anticipate any property being affected, or any type of like public works disruptions?
So the construction will be a dual pipeline from the town of Southborough, right about where the Amtrak train station is, on Cedar Street. It will continue 2 mains up Cedar Street until we get to the intersection of Legacy Farms Road North, where there'll be a pump station. There'll be a 12-inch line that goes up Legacy Farms Road North and a 12-inch line that goes up Cedar Street to the center of town. So all of that area that I just described will be construction within the public way. There won't be any effect on private property whatsoever.
And once the work is complete, it will all be sort of put back to the standard conditions.
That's correct. The construction of the roadway will be in disrepair for about 1 construction season, and then the temporary patch will go down and the road will sit and the patch will settle for a winter, and then the following year we'll either do a curb-to-curb reconstruction or repaving the entire roadway, or at least that entire lane down Route 85 where the dual pipes are installed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now let's move on to some questions for the school committee.
Before you move on, we have one question that just came in about MWRA. Can you explain what that is and clarify?
Sure. The MWRA, that's an acronym that stands for the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority. So it's a source of water from the Quabbin Reservoir that serves over 100 communities, including the city of Boston. There is an MWRA pipeline that runs through the town of Southborough. So we would be doing an indirect connection. In other words, we'll be getting water from the MWRA, but through the pipeline or through the pipe network in the town of Southborough. That is a water supply that is sustainable. It meets all of our needs for the next 20 years and into the future beyond. It meets all of DEP's requirements for clean water. It will remove iron and manganese and PFAS concerns because that will no longer be in the water. They've tested their water extensively and they found that it doesn't include any of those contaminants. And the other good thing about this is not only the ample water supply and it meets all the regulations, but should there be another contaminant that becomes a regulation, for example, last year we had PFAS. Nobody tested for PFAS before last year. If there's another contaminant that comes down the road, it's shared, the solution to that contaminant is shared by more than 100 communities. The state is involved, so it's not just the town of Hopkinton that has to build a $600,000 filtration system, but it's shared by more than 100 communities to solve that problem.
Thanks. So, so let's move on to the school committee. This is Article 29 that relates to the marathon school additional cost increase, which is 695,000. So what was the original amount approved for last year's town meeting? And is the increase now because of inflation or, because the scope of the project was expanded?
So I'm happy to take the first part of that question. Our original request was for $3,625,000, and that was for 4 classrooms. Our scope has not changed, but Mrs. Rotherman can help you understand what has.
So the estimate for the construction was developed in the fall of 20 for the May 21 town meeting. What we were beginning to see at that time really was the construction cost increase due to the pandemic. So by the time we got to the end of 21 and at the end of 22, there's a 9% increase construction cost that we keep seeing. So year over year has represented an 18% increase in the costs that were originally estimated. So that really is what has driven this. And I think you'll see that in some other articles where the construction costs increase have just been impacted by the pandemic.
Okay. How many classrooms will be added? How many additional classrooms?
So there are 4 classrooms that will be added. And I know one of your questions is, will this carry us into the future? And so it's really difficult to pinpoint that right now. We have a demographer who's done some work for us, and that person puts us at about 600 students in the year 3031. So should something like that sustain, it would feel like in that place we would be okay. The MSBA puts us at slightly greater numbers of kids. But right now, an important thing that we're seeing is our integrated preschool is growing. So the integrated preschool is technically a special education program. Every school district has one. Hopkinton has usually hovered at around 80 students in integrated preschool. We've always historically had 4 classrooms. This year we have 5. Next year the plan is to have 6. And so they are also occupying classrooms in that building. So it is really difficult to say if in 3031 we will be in a place where we would need to add classrooms or not. But when we looked at the 4 classrooms, we believed at that time that we would be in an okay place. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
One of the things that we have been doing, we have moved kids into non-traditional classrooms. So students are in the art classroom as a for instance. So as we add these 4 classrooms, we'll be able to put art back into that actual art room that was designed for that. Should we get to 3031 and our projections continue to grow with the potential of preschool, then our first thought would be again to then move into those non-traditional classrooms to try to alleviate space concerns and just continue to monitor the projections, out another 10 years and see where it goes.
And given that integrated preschool is a special education program, the students who would be entering that at age 3, they are children who would have had early intervention services. So we're not sure if kids are just not making the same progress that they would have because of the pandemic. A lot of the EI services have been done, online, and it's very difficult, I think, to deliver services to parents and very young children, in that kind of format. So, this bubble may go down.
Thank you. This one. Right. The next question is for Norman Kumalo, the town Manager. So this relates to Article 8 to 10, which address this issue related to PEG access, cable-related funds, and HCAM's enterprise fund. So can you explain these?
Thank you. Good evening, and want to thank eHop for one more time organizing this event. I have seen this event become part of our culture, and it's now a strong institution that helps us to deliver our town meeting. So thank you. In terms of the specific question, I believe there's a very simple explanation. In Massachusetts, towns are authorized to negotiate with cable providers for the financial impact on the community. And that arena of negotiations between the towns and the cable providers is defined by the state law and state regulations. Over the years, and most recently, the state has been working on finalizing how the monies that are received from the cable providers are actually transferred to the local access channels. It took the state a long time to really define how exactly that happens. It has eventually identified two ways of doing so. One way is to create an enterprise. As we all know, an enterprise identifies an institution or an entity that becomes part of town government. The second option is to create a revolving fund. A revolving fund allows the town and working with the cable providers to deposit money into an account. Therein lies the problem. For the local access cable channel to be able to withdraw from that revolving fund, they must have the funds in hand, in their pocket. We don't have that money in Hopkinton because previously the law allowed us to move the money directly to the local access channel, and therefore we're not holding any funds right now for that purpose. That is the reason why we're going to town meeting and asking town meeting for this coming year to put money in the revolving fund that we can transfer directly to HCAM. In this year, the monies that are coming from the cable fund will therefore be available in the coming year. So the simple explanation is, in summary, the state makes the law. The state gave us two options to create a mechanism for moving funds that are coming in through negotiations between the town and the cable provider to the local access channel. We went to town meeting a couple years back, created an enterprise, and we realized, oops, the town doesn't want to own HCAM, so that's why we're going to the revolving fund, asking town people to put some down payment in the revolving fund to allow the local access cable channel to continue providing the essential services, including what we're experiencing tonight.
So this is more of a housekeeping article than anything else.
It's more than housekeeping because we're asking taxpayers to take money from their pockets and put it into the books of HCAM.
We did have a question come in for the school committee, so we're going to try to address those questions as they come in. We're going to try not to jump around. But this question asks, the voters are being asked to borrow more money for our school system. Can you discuss your plans to develop meaningful coursework around personal financial planning for our future voters? If not, can you provide your reasons as to why not?
So my understanding right now is that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education does not have a financial literacy curriculum that's required to be taught in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But that doesn't mean that, Mr. Bishop and the high school teachers or middle school teachers wouldn't be prepared to do that with our kids. It's certainly something I could go back and ask the Assistant Superintendent, Jennifer Parson, about, because she's really the person who's responsible for curriculum.
Excellent. Thank you.
So the next question is for Dan Terry from Parks and Rec. So this is Article 28 relating to the turf field replacement. And so it states that 400,000 from the 400,000 that's budgeted comes from the Parks and Recreation's Fruit Street account, and the remaining 1,271,543 is to be borrowed. So how long will this turf field last, and will a portion be covered by user fees?
So maybe part of the way to answer this is to explain the difference between that 400,000, or explain where that $400,000 came from. The Parks and Rec department manages that field on an annual basis, and all of our users pay to rent the field to use it, whether it's for practices or games. There's different rates depending on whether it's an in-town user group like youth soccer or youth lacrosse, or an out-of-town group like groups that we would have had in there a few weekends ago that rented the fields for tournaments over the weekend. Those tournaments end up generating anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 on a weekend. There are some costs associated with it. We need to plow fields and do that type of thing, but they end up being revenue positive. So as money goes into that fund, we use those funds for maintenance to the field, repairs to the field over time. So that's where that 400,000 piece of it came from to contribute. Since there's the $400,000 in that account, that's the first $400,000 that gets spent towards this $1.7 million project. The question on how long the field will last, the current field, I believe when we put it in, I wasn't on the commission when we put it in, I think the expectation for these fields are 8 to 13 years, somewhere in that neighborhood. Different components on that field, but this is year 12. We started in 2011 and we're using the field now in 2022. So we've gotten good use out of it. I know the time that I've spent with consultants have suggested that the way we use it and the way we maintain it has done a good job of getting more years out of it. I know that there are some fields that have only gotten 7 or 8 years out of their field. So I think it's reasonable to anticipate that we'll get that 11, 12 years out of the field that we're gonna construct this fall.
Okay, so it's really time to replace it. Rather
It is,
than
and I think
repair
it is time to replace it. We had Jay Gulfey led the project to bring some consultants out, take a look at it, just get an idea of how much more of a useful life we have and what we needed to put into it in order to get a couple more years out of it, just to keep it in adequate condition. And we really made the decision that rather than throwing good money after bad, and just to keep the thing usable for the next year or two, that the timing would be good now to go ahead and replace it. One of the benefits or one of the differences with this field is this field, the way we have it, the way it's going to be done is completely consistent with the turf fields in the high school. So it's going to be pretty much an identical field in terms of the infill and the padding, the shock pad that's there. One of the differences people will find between the two fields is back when this field was originally conceived and bid out back in 2010, there were no shock pads available, and the primary infill was the crushed rubber that everyone has in the back seat of their car. Hopefully it's there, not all the way through the house. So that was the only option. Now the option that there are better, more environmentally safe options, and that's what we're going with here. So that's something that we're excited about is to have a safer field in that regard.
Okay, and who will oversee the maintenance cost that's written into the FY23 budget?
So the maintenance costs will we maintain that out of the user fees in general. But in terms of who's going to oversee it, I'm going to ask Jay to go ahead and stand up because he actually has a plan to start to work with some professionals in that regard. Sure.
Actually, Jay, if you want to join.
Where do I want to go up here?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for having me. When you talk about the cost of maintaining the field, I want to refer back to what Mr. Kamalo said, which is we manage this field through a revolving fund. So basically, a revolving fund is you take fees in, user fees in, and you pay expenses. Your expenses can't exceed your revenues. Pretty simple. Any net proceeds from that any net revenues after maintenance and administrative goes to field replacement. So as far as managing the maintenance, the Parks and Rec Department manages the actual maintenance. We hire folks to plow it. We hire folks to clean it. We have our friends at Public Works who help us out quite a bit with water and with any heavy lifting that has to be done. But the maintenance of the facility is done from our department with guidance from our friends in other departments and our commission.
Thank you.
Sure.
Now I'll move on to some questions relating to the CPC. This relates to Article 31, that is the Community Preservation Funds. This question goes to Ken Weismantel.
Is he better off taking
Yeah.
this?
Would you-
Yes.
So the Article 31, it divides the community preservation funds into the usual buckets like recreation, historic preservation, community housing, etc. But there is one line item which is slated for $1,051,000 for budgeted reserve. What is that?
Okay. By law, we're required to put 10% into affordable housing, historic preservation, open space, and recreation. That leaves about 60% of our anticipated revenues can go into any use that CPA allows to be done there. So this, by putting it into this budgeted reserve, that allows us to, I'll say, park the money there until we authorize expenditure in another article, the one that follows directly after that. And CPC basically keeps all the funds that are collected until we find a good project to spend them on. And so we build up a reserve, and so we can then, say, buy a large parcel of land, or many years ago we contributed to affordable housing behind the senior center, or we build parts of a field or a park, or buy some open space. So basically we kind of, I'll say, park the money in that area. So we have to by law put 10% into the four buckets, and then the rest 60% goes into this budgeted reserve, and that can be spent on any one of the CPC funds.
Thank you. The next article, which is the 32G, relates to CPC and Parks and Rec. So this is relating to the Fruit Street Pickleball Court with parking lot, which is budgeted for $775,000. So who wants to take the question?
We might bring Jay back up here.
Okay.
We'll have you back up soon, Ken.
Oh, I should have asked. So, where will this be on Fruit Street, the pickleball court?
So if you're familiar with Fruit Street in the area, if you know where the new dog park is, the pickleball courts will literally be right across the street from the existing dog park.
Okay. And will this be open to public at all times, or do people have to, like, say, book a time slot?
So our plan is for it to be open to the public as long as weather permits. I do anticipate probably some kind of an organized pickleball league in town. That's the rumblings I'm hearing from the folks who are really pickleball enthusiasts. So other than maybe some time slots devoted towards an organized pickleball league, we would have them open to the public. Yeah.
Jay, for people that aren't familiar with this new craze, can you tell us how long?
Sure. So pickleball, if you're all familiar with tennis, so if you can imagine a tennis court shrunk by 50%, say, like half a tennis court, but still lined the same way, played with shorter paddles and like a wiffle ball tennis ball. So a much smaller space with a much, a ball that's not traveling at the same rate of speed. That can be played primarily for doubles. So our friends in Westboro built pickleball courts a few years ago. It's been highly successful over there and very well received. Our mission statement for Parks and Recreation is to provide inclusive and diverse programs for every resident. We're really good as an organization for providing programs for our youth, but one of the demographics that it's hard to do that for is active seniors. Pickleball is really designed for active seniors. Not that young kids can't play or anyone can play, but really people over 50 who are active love pickleball. If you've been paying attention at all, you can see like there are now planned communities that are planned around pickleball. So it is a kind of a phenomenon, and we want to have it part of our community.
And it's something the community is asking for.
There's a high demand. Similar.
Yeah, Jay, if I can, so we've had a number of people come to our meetings, make requests for this for the last year and a half or so. It is something that I have friends that are going to Upton and Westboro to go and do this. There's courts in Upton, Westboro, Grafton. Most surrounding towns already have a program in place and have resources to play the game. We're excited about this. We think it's going to be very popular.
And it continues our organization's investment in the Fruit Street area, which has been important to us.
Yep.
And is this court specially designed for pickleball, or can it be like used for multiple sports?
Good question. So we initially toyed with the idea of having like a pickleball tennis hybrid type of court. The more we thought about it and the more I asked around, apparently pickleball folks and tennis folks aren't necessarily the best of friends. So we think maybe a pickleball only facility now, and maybe revisit the tennis, because we do desperately need tennis courts in town as well. But yeah, we thought about maybe having pickleball and tennis combined, but we thought better of it.
Just from a density standpoint, one tennis court, you can have it be hybrid, but you could play, as Jay said, pickleball's played in doubles frequently, so there's 4 people playing at a time. You can have four tennis courts.
You could legitimately have 12 people playing on 3 courts that are the size of one tennis court.
Where 2 people would be playing singles. So
right.
It's
if you line it correctly and use your space well, just what we plan on doing.
Okay. What's the maintenance like, and who will maintain it?
It's very simple, actually. You sweep it, you keep it dry. We'll maintain it. And we have a lot of people volunteering. We're going to have a Hopkins pickleball club, and they're going to be down there every day. We're going to have grooms for them to sweep up their club, very similar to tennis courts.
Yeah.
We'll store the nets in our Fruit Street storage area in the winter, and we'll keep them clean. And it's very similar to maintaining a tennis court. It's really a low maintenance facility.
Okay.
No grass.
So there's no like projected cost or anything. It's very low.
I project it to be $1,500 to $2,000 a year to maintain.
Okay.
You got to touch up the lines a little bit. You got to, we're going to seal it, so hopefully it shouldn't crack. I'm sure there'll be a warranty, similar to a tennis court. But other than that, it's really just sweeping and squeegee the water off.
Okay. Thanks. We have a live question from a community member who commented on the YouTube channel. So the installation of the turf at the high school came with problems, gaps opening between different sections of the turf. Is the town planning to use the same company to install the turf at Fruit Street?
So we put that out to bid, and I'll let the procurement and finance folks maybe talk about that process, but we don't know yet who's gonna be constructing the field because we're waiting to receive bids next week.
The other thing I'd add is that, I mean, with any construction project, there are gonna be problems that occur. Maybe the folks from the school department could speak to it, but I'm imagining that these problems on the field are being handled by warranty. So, probably not an ideal situation to have that open up, but our intention would be to work with reputable vendors. We're kind of restricted by the process of going out to bid and seeing what the most economical bids are.
Yeah, and the other thing is to keep in mind, unlike the high school project where they had to start from scratch and do all the engineering and moving a lot of earth, we've already done that. We did that 11 years ago with the initial fields. This is really just like removing a carpet and replacing it, putting a shock pad underneath, and new, more environmentally friendly infill. So it's not as complex as a project as the high school fields were.
Thanks. I think the next question may also be for you. This relates to EMC Park improvements. This is Article 32F. EMC Park improvements requiring engineering study costs of bathrooms, budgeted for 50,000. So again, this money is just for the study and not the construction, correct?
Correct.
And will the bathrooms be open to the public at all times or just during sporting events?
So again, we're in the very early stages of this, and we're open to that. We're developing that property with a skate park. We have our Little League down there, and we also have a playground down there. We currently use porta johns, which quite honestly it's not the way to go. We envisioned something similar to Fruit Street. Permanent bathrooms, a storage area, a concession area, maybe not the same size as the building on Fruit Street, but something similar in the idea. I envision those bathrooms to be open during Little League season. I envision those bathrooms being open in the summer while we have folks at the playground, similar to Fruit Street.
So and if I could, the purpose of these funds for a study for that is when we built the structure that's at Fruit Street, we might have been a little naive in thinking that it's just a structure. It's just whatever the dimensions are that we're building. But I believe that if I remember correctly, that 30% of the cost of that was the tie-in to utilities. And this $50,000 here is to do a study to kind of understand and engineer some of that work so that we know what the next level of a request is apt to be when we get into the construction process.
And will these be monitored, say, for cleanliness and so on?
Yeah, so similar to Fruit Street, we hire a service that comes and cleans the bathrooms 2-3 times a week during peak seasons, and Sandy Beach, we use the same company.
Okay.
And again, our friends at Public Works, they really help us out with any of the heavy lifting and the repairs. They never deny a request.
Thank you.
Sure.
The next question is for Jane Moran. This relates to the campus trail connector.
Thank you for joining
Good
us.
evening, and thank you for hosting this forum.
Thank you.
Jane Moran, Chairman of the Upper Charles Trail Committee. And what is the question?
So recently, no action was recommended for this Article 32E, which is the campus trail connector. So why was this position taken, and what has changed since it was initially, brought onto the warrant?
Okay, that's a good question. When we initially put in the request to CPC for our funding for the trail to be engineered, it was an engineering request. That was back in January, February of this year. After that, we did multiple public hearings and took many requests and comments and questions from the public. We then did an analysis of those questions, and we determined that we needed to do a further study and look at it and come back with some more answers for the public. So we asked the CPC to consider taking no action on our request, and they voted on that last Thursday, and that's what they did.
And why? So why is this being proposed separately as like just for the two segments, without considering the entire trail to be worked out, the layout of the whole trail?
So it's a very complex project. It's a almost 8-mile section between the Milford parking lot all the way up to the Hopkins State Park. This very small piece of the conversation that erupted, I will say, in the last few months is probably less than a quarter of a mile along Hayden Road. It's our belief that the town owns the right-of-way for this section and that we can build it. After so many people asked a lot of questions, we realized that we need to step back and determine where the right-of-way is, and that's going to take some more engineering. So that does not preclude the fact that this is a huge project all the way from Hopkinton to Milford. Having said that, we will continue to work on the other large segments and take this very small section and continue to study it and work on it. So we will be doing multiple studies and engineering projects as we go along.
Okay. And would you consider a design study for the alternate trail route also, so that citizens can sort of compare the costs that both the routes offer?
Okay, so when you say alternative paths, I'm not really sure what you're talking about, because we are looking at all of the new information that we took in. So over the past, not only years, but more general, more realistically in the last few months. So we are looking at all of the new information, and we will definitely and continue to look at all of that information.
Okay, so you will be sort of budgeting for doing additional studies for alternate routes going forward?
Well, budgeting. That's a huge question. We asked CPC to take no action on these most recent requests that we put in to CPC, but that does not preclude us from using our funding to continue our work on the whole project.
So what aspects of the project will sort of be, the budget will be used for? What other aspects of the project?
It's really up to the committee. And the committee will be looking, we meet the first and third Wednesday of every month, and we continue to look at and analyze and rely on our team. We have a professional team that assists us, and we rely on them heavily to guide us in not only where our committees would like to go, but what's realistic and what would, be feasible going forward.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
We have a live question from a community member, Shahidul Manan, and I think this relates to. Let me read out the question. So clearly our projected town services cost growth and major investments needed for school, DPWD, etc., will be in excess of projected Proposition 2.5% levy cap and will be challenged in FY 2024. Above is excerpt, so this is an excerpt that he's mentioning from budget summary. Can you please help elaborate on this for better understanding of our citizens? What are the options for mitigating this risk? So can I ask this question to you, Norman?
Yeah, thank you. As part of developing the budget, we have instituted some fundamental activities conducted by our professional staff. And one of the things that we do in formulating a budget is to continuously revisit, evaluate our projections. And I think what your question is referring to is the information that shows deficits in the outlying years. And specifically, the answer to your question is, number one, we have to continue to manage spend. And I think our departments do a good job in developing budgets, in making sure that we're only paying for what is absolutely necessary to keep the levels of service that this town has enjoyed for the past years. Secondly, we also continue to find alternative funding sources. For a town of this size with our budget, our fund development, in other words, money that comes from outside sources, is averaging about $5 million. I think that's a big accomplishment. And then thirdly, we are constantly engaging the community in finding other ways of making our budget situation manageable. Again, all of this is coming from one aspect of our budget that we've developed over the years, namely doing budget projections.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next question is to CPC, Ken Westmantle. I think this is a question for you again, if you could please. This relates to Article 32I. So there is a to be determined sum of money for the purchase of the Conroy property on Saddle Hill. And this is an 88.29 acres. So where is this and how much will this likely cost?
Well, first of all, where it is, it's off of Saddle Hill. It's kind of between the state forest and some of the open space that surrounds that subdivision that's very close to it. It's a fairly large parcel. It's probably not very developable because there's very little access to it. It's woods. There's some informal trails that go through it currently. You can get to the state park, to basically almost to Saddle Hill, kind of through that area. It's a good parcel for open space. We the town manager specifically is negotiating with the owner. You know, we're giving him to the last second. Right now, I don't know what it's going to cost because negotiations are ongoing. We, as a committee, if the negotiations are successful between now and Thursday, this will be on the warrant to purchase it if it's a reasonable price and negotiations are successful. If it's not, we're going to pull it on Thursday. But we do have a willing seller. who's looking at the appraisals that the town got done this spring. Took a long time to get the appraisals, so we're at the last minute for town meeting. I wish I had this answer in front of you, but this is a nice piece of property that the committee, if we're successful, would like to recommend to purchase it with our open space funds.
And this article also seems to overlap in another place, Article 44 under land acquisition. Why is it there in two places?
I'm not sure why the Open Space Committee put the belt and suspenders on that. I would hope that the people would want to spend CPC money, which is already collected. It's not an additional tax. We do get our 2% and about 35 to 40% match from the state. We'd rather use that funds for open space than taking it out of something that we raise and appropriate. And so I'm sure that if we are successful in negotiations, it'll come out of CPC money, not out of raise and appropriate.
If I may.
Yeah.
The article is in two locations purely for insurance purposes. I think one other thing that needs to be said is my understanding is that this is a strategic acquisition for the town. It's land that abuts town-owned open space, and the town has sought this parcel for many years, and thus that we are now talking and negotiating with the developer, I think is a good development for the community.
Could I ask a follow-up question? If you don't come up with an agreement, if we don't purchase this land this year, is there a potential that it could be developed?
There is always that option.
But, you know, if we don't make it by Thursday, because negotiations sometimes take longer, CPC is willing to put it on next year's agenda, you know, but right now we have somebody that we're negotiating with. We had like 4 or 5 other parcels that throughout the year we were kind of hoping that we could also buy, some of them for trails, some other, you know, open space type parcels, and we didn't have willing sellers, so, you know, they went nowhere. And but we would really like, well, all the ones that we had, I think there was support within the committee to go ahead with the purchases, but you know, you got to have a willing seller, and sometimes people don't want to sell.
Thank you.
Okay.
So the next question relates to land acquisition again. So this is the Article 45, the citizens petition, 0 and 71 Franklin Road. This petition was submitted by Ann Karnowski, and if I can direct this question to maybe Norman again. So
I'm here. Ann Karnowski is here.
Oh, hi Ann. Thanks for joining us. So Ann Karnowski is joining us by phone. Do you want to briefly talk about the background about this petition, like what's behind this petition?
Well, to go back as far as 1976, Liberty Mutual owned the forest behind their building on Franklin Road, and they allowed the community to use the long trails and look at the historic remnants from colonial days and observe the wildlife in there. They even stocked the lake with fish. And what happened is suddenly Liberty Mutual sold the property, and the town was not interested at that time. So Liberty sold it to Seaboard Solar Company. Now, I was extremely upset, and I organized Save the Forest, which is a community-wide group. It isn't just 10 citizens. the parcel is about 100 acres, of which 12 are already preserved by HALT, called Deer Run Sanctuary. This forest is between Fawn Ridge Road, Cross Street, and Franklin Road. It's unbuildable from my experience. It's hilly, it's mostly wetlands, it has many streams, no access, and it is completely, can I say, oxymoronic to cut down a mature, usable forest, usable for recreation and habitat, to put in solar panels. So my group was founded because we can't let that happen, and the Growth Management Committee has marked this area as necessary to conserve for the town. There's nothing like it because all we have on the side of town closest to Ashland, all we have is North and South Legacy Farms. I don't want to insult them, but there's a lot of people. And we have already 2 commercial solar farms, one on East Main Street and one on Scenic Wilson Street. I don't think we need to cut down our last remaining forested parcel to put in yet another solar farm. And if we do cut new ground, so to speak, and take it by eminent domain, because Seaboard Solar refuses to even negotiate with Norman for a price, I've spoken with town officials to find out that if it is considered to be unbuildable, that it'll cost $700,000 to buy it at $10,000 an acre. I did put in $500,000, but it will be $700,000 since there's about 70 acres. And it will be contiguous with Deer Run Sanctuary, which is 12 acres. So now it's been renumbered as 69 Franklin Road, which means it extends right to road frontage on Franklin Street, but it does not include the Liberty Mutual building. So I would love to hear some enthusiasm for the town owning that and preserving it.
Yeah.
Or any other questions?
Yeah. Thank you, Anne, for giving us the background around this petition. So I'd like to ask some follow-up questions here. What is the funding source for this eminent domain purchase?
Okay.
Norman,
Yeah.
maybe you can. Oh, okay.
What
Yeah.
I could say is, excuse me, but that community preservation was interested in it last year, so I imagine they will be again.
If I may,
Yes, Norman. Thank you.
this issue actually came to this town's attention way after the budget process closed. Currently, there is no identified funding source for this request.
And does this meet the standard for an eminent domain taking?
Town council has reviewed that question and has not raised any concerns.
Okay. And what would be like the definition of public use if this were to be purchased and used for that purpose?
Based on the information provided by the petitioner, the public use would be open space and recreational purposes.
And if this article does not pass, then what would happen to the land?
The land will continue to be in private hands.
Thank you, Anne. Is there anything you would like to add to this?
Well, I wanted to emphasize again that when I first brought it up for a community preservation committee, they were interested in it, and we could not get a response from Seaboard Solar that would we wanted Norman to negotiate with them for a price where we wouldn't have to go through eminent domain. But it seems to me, unless we want the whole 70 acres clear cut, and we want the deer munching on people's private shrubbery because they'll have no place to go, that we should proceed and take it by eminent domain. And since it's unbuildable, we would be able to purchase it through community preservation funds for the reasonable price of $700,000, $10,000 an acre.
Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
The next question also relates to land acquisition, and I'll direct this question to Norman Khumalo. This was asked by a community member, Ted Barker Hook. Article 45 relates to Article 45. Does the Select Board support this article? Let's see what Article 45 is.
It's the same article.
Oh, that's the same one. Yeah, the citizens petition. Okay, follow up. Does the Select Board support this article, and are there other boards or commissions in town who have asked to weigh in on this article?
My understanding so far is that the Select Board voted 4-0, one abstention to oppose this article. And with your permission, Mike Manning is present and can explain the Appropriations Committee's position.
Hello. So thank you for having me tonight. So the Appropriation Committee did take a vote on this, and we did vote to take no action. The reasoning that we had was basically, foremost, there was not enough information available to, basically for the funding. I know Ann Karnofsky is saying 700,000, but we really couldn't understand if that's really the value, because it has been permitted for use as a solar panels. So that would really make it a lot more than 700,000. So we really couldn't go on those numbers. So other than that, the Appropriation Committee could not really take a vote to approve this. And there is no funding for it at this time.
Thank you.
Okay.
The next question also relates to land acquisition, and I would direct this question to Irfan Nasrullah. He's joined us remotely, but through Zoom. Hello, Irfan.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for hosting this as well.
This relates to the easement of 2 Oakhurst Road for a proposed bus stop. Now, do the current property owners support this article, and how much will it cost, and why is it necessary?
So the property owners do support this. They are in favor of it, and it won't cost the town anything. Obviously, it's for a bus stop. This development the town has seen, there's more children and more stops are necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure.
The next question it's just a general question around our increasing taxes, like with some of the big ticket items and so on. What kind of impact will this have on our taxpayers, and if these articles pass?
So I think Tim may be more appropriate for an answer on this.
Yeah. Yeah, if I can direct this question to Tim O'Leary. Thank you, Irfan.
My pleasure.
Hi.
Thanks for that question. Good question. So there are 6 capital projects that are proposed for funding within the general fund budget in this cycle, and they're covered in Articles 25 to 30. They total about $4.4 million in spending, and the motions show that some of them are proposed to be funded partially or fully from remaining funds that were borrowed in past projects and were not needed, either because the projects were canceled or truncated or because they came in under budget due to the good work of the town. Because of this, about 57% of this $4.4 million amount would be borrowed, and the rest would not need to be borrowed because we'd be using surplus funds instead of borrowing. And because of the existing funds are being used for some of the projects, the tax impact from this batch of 6 projects would be about $36 or 0.31% on the average home, which you'll see from time to time on the slide as being a $681,000 house with a $11,599 tax bill. So but that's not free money. We're going to use existing town money to pay for these things. So we also want to tell you that the full impact of doing all these projects, if we were borrowing the whole amount, because we're using money that taxpayers have already contributed, would be about $58 or about half of 1% on the average tax bill. And if anybody wants to know about any of the specific projects, I can tell you what fraction of that 0.5% it would be for each project.
I think that was a good explanation.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks.
you. And sorry to jump around a bit, but I have a few questions again for Irfan Nasrullah. So this relates to Article 54, the pilot agreement on Wilson Street Solar Farm. Irfan, could you explain to us what a pilot agreement is?
No, I'm actually going to have Norman jump in on this.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Irfan. Fortunately for me, my lifeline is right next to me. John Nis will do that.
Thank you all. So a pilot agreement stands for payment in lieu of taxes. That's what the acronym is for. But if you look at the Department of Revenue regulations, the value of the solar development is based on what they call full and fair cash value of the property. That means that the assessed value of the solar development will be no different whether there is a pilot agreement or whether there is not a pilot agreement. The developer likes to have a pilot agreement basically for a couple of reasons: for their investors and for their lender, so that they have a pretty good idea of what the real estate tax on the project will be over the 25-year term of the lease. But the way we structure the pilot agreement is at full and fair cash value. So a couple of things will happen. There is the potential for about $8.5 million in growth from the project, and the pilot payments start at roughly $145,000 in year one. And they decline over the term of the 25 years to about $55,000 in the last year. That's because we are talking about personal equipment, personal property equipment, which depreciates over the term of that 25 years. But it's a nice situation for both the town and the developer because we're getting full and fair cash assessed value of the property.
Does this have any impact on whether the solar farm will be expanded on this property?
If I'm understanding your question, you are asking if the pilot agreement prohibits the expansion of the solar farm? The answer is no.
Okay. I think that's all we have for the pilot agreement. We have a few more questions relating to the TIF agreement, that is Article 53, the Lykan Bioscience, the TIF agreement. Again, for those who may not know, what is TIF?
I'm going to do that one too. All right, so a TIF, a TIF agreement is a tax increment financing agreement, and it's actually an innovative tool that's available to a municipality to provide the redevelopment of a site through both a public and private partnership. So the property at 103 to 105 South Street is privately owned, and the partnership would be between that property owner and Lykan Bioscience. So the agreement does give a tax break to the developer, so we want to be clear about that, but it also results in what's referred to as a higher and better use of the site and an increase in the assessed value of the property over time. Lykan, as you might know, currently has a TIF agreement at their 97 South Street property. They are going to continue their operation there. The new TIF is an expansion of the company in Hopkinton at the 103 to 105 South Street site. And what they're going to do is demolish two existing buildings that total about 45,000 square feet of space. And they're going to construct a new state-of-the-art facility with about 112,000 square feet of space. So it's a better use of an existing site. We spent a lot of time negotiating the agreement in meetings. It's a good compromise for both the town and Lykan. They are going to pay an amount of taxes that are similar to the assessed value on the existing building until the new building is under construction. And then that assessment will increase over time as they make their improvements. They have demonstrated their commitment to the town of Hopkinton with their first TIF agreement and their current facility, both with the creation of new permanent full-time jobs in Hopkinton and with their support of local programs and organizations. And I think you might have more.
Yes. In terms of what Lykan has done based on the existing TIF, the following are worth noting. When the TIF was signed, they were projected to invest $12 million. To date, they've invested $22 million. They projected to create 125 jobs. To date, they've already created 70 jobs. In addition, they have shared with us that further to our discussions regarding DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, they have done the following in terms of the jobs created. Educational attainment, they have approximately 5 to 7% African American, 1% Asian, 82% Caucasian, 7% Hispanic, and 1% mixed race in terms of their staff complement. In addition, we also wanted them, and when we negotiated the current TIF, to be very responsible neighbors. They have developed relationships with nonprofits here in town, including the Hopkinton Arts Center for the Arts, Project Just Because, the Michael Lisner Respite Center, Hopkinton One Mission, and they're an active member of the Hopkinton Chamber of Commerce. We had also asked them to commit to working with our colleagues in the school system. They have high school internship programs, participating in the high school STEM mentorship program, and finally, they also facilitate college corps.
Thank you. We have a couple of last few questions for zoning and planning. And this is for Mary Larson Arno. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
So this relates to Article 34, maximum gross floor area, Industrial A district. Can you explain what that means, maximum gross floor area, and why is this change recommended?
Thank you. I believe it's Article, which one?
34.
34? Okay.
Yeah.
The gross floor area as defined in the zoning bylaws, on page 3 of the zoning bylaws, for those of you following along at home, the sum of the gross horizontal areas of the several floors of a building. I'm going to paraphrase from here on, excluding accessory uses like garages and basements that are used exclusively for items accessory to the operation of the building. So essentially, it is your square footage. It's like your home square footage. So gross floor area. If there's a footprint of a building that's 5,000 square feet footprint, and it has 3 floors of the same floor area, and then it would be 15,000 feet of gross floor area. So the proposed change to the bylaw is among the setback, some of the really basic parts of the zoning bylaw, and it's this is specific to Industrial A, which is South Street for layman's terms, and it redefines the gross floor area from 50% of the total lot size to 80% of the total lot size. I believe that's. Can you double check my, I had it up before, but is that right? Okay. So what this means is that this gives more flexibility in designing a building to take it up, basically. However, there are other zoning rules that limit the height of buildings and limit the number of floors. I think we have a limit of 3 floors in that particular zone, for instance. So it is not, this particular change. They're still going to have to meet the other zoning requirements, but it does give them more flexibility in terms of building perhaps higher floors and not having to have a really large lot to do so. Okay?
There's also a follow-up question. If this will lead to impervious surfaces and less green.
No, actually, quite the opposite, because we're basically saying that I think I know what that person is getting at, or that follow-up question is getting at. They're thinking that people will expand horizontally, and people will choose to make a huge one-story building and leave a tiny little bit of green space somewhere on the outside. That's not ever a design problem that we actually encounter in planning board. It really is more about they want to leave less impervious space. They want to spend less on parking lots and things like that, and they don't want to cover up as much of the land. And so this enables them to go up and makes it less of a problem meeting all of the calculations that are in there. This is also something that I just wanted to add. We did compare this particular zoning regulation to other towns in the area, and although I don't have all those numbers in front of me, we worked with Chamber of Commerce, and they helped gather some of this information. So this is one of many things we've been trying to do over the last 5 years or so that I've been involved, to make our zoning bylaws, particularly in Industrial A and Industrial B, more comparable to other towns nearby, and therefore make it less of a disincentive to build in our town for businesses and industry.
Thank you. I think those are, we've come to the end of our Q&A session. That was the last one. David, do you want to wrap Yeah, so I think we covered a lot today in such a short amount of time. Thank you all for coming and carving out your time for yet another evening and answering all our questions. Thank you so much. All the guests who also came, as well as the panelists. Again, we have everything you need. Those of you who are watching on TV as well as YouTube stream, we're going to have, if you want to go back and refer to this, we're going to have this recorded session available to you as soon as it's available. We're going to upload it on our website and or link it to our website. But also check out HCAM's YouTube channel where this will be available. It'll be archived. And again, anything else you need in terms of the materials and other town meeting articles, it's all there in the website. Thank you again, everybody, and thank you to the town manager's office, the superintendent's office, HCAM TV for making this show possible. And we'll see you next Monday at the High School Athletics Center, May 2nd, 7 p.m. Thank you.